Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in again to Candy's Prayer Closet. Today, you're going to hear the testimony of my friend Helen. She has so much to share and offer. This one went a little long, like the last one, so we are going to break it up into 2 episodes. So today will be the first, and then next Friday, you will get the second half of Miss Helen's story. So be sure that you tune in again next week, and I hope you guys enjoy. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again here on Candy's Prayer Closet. Today, I'm with my good friend, Miss Helen, and she's going to tell her story. Helen, I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
I know that you're probably a little nervous, but it's okay. We're going to just take our time and work through it. And I'm really excited about this because I know that Helen has a story. I've heard her story, and I know that she's got a story that's going to change some people's lives. I believe that. I believe it's going to help people. And I believe it's going to help you sharing this. So I'm super excited that God's allowed us to do this. And before we get started, if you're okay with it, I might just ask you to share why you chose to share.
Sure.
Sorry.
I feel like we're going to cry the
whole time.
The whole time. So, 4 years ago, I entered into therapy, and a couple of years into that therapy, I realized that one of the biggest problems in my life was that held back my joy was there were so many secrets, just lots of secrets. And whether it was bad stuff or good stuff, I just always kept it enclosed. And so I met this girl here, Edie. The first time I came to share my story with you, there's this strange woman that shows up, which nearly causes me to have a meltdown. But, I still get tense thinking about a stranger showing up when I'm telling my story. But the more I listened to her and the more I heard her testimony, the more I wanted to be like Edie. So I started watching her at church, and she worshiped with no hesitation. She had joy. She had a smile. She loved God. And she loved people. From what I could tell, I barely knew this woman, but she was like my hero. And then tragically, a week ago or 2 weeks ago,
2 weeks ago. Yes, time has flown.
I know.
Yeah, tomorrow will be 2 weeks.
She died in a car wreck going to church. And if you knew her testimony, I mean, it was a miracle. I mean, she's one of the 1% that actually break her chains.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, she was amazing. And, I just decided to do it in her memory because she was an open book, or I felt like she was an open book. And I wanted
to use all of her story to help bring people closer to the Lord and show them what He had done for her.
Right. And, I just want to tell it because I think people need to hear it. And I think I need to tell it in order to heal.
Amen. Amen. Well, whenever you messaged me and told me, I've decided I want to share this in memory of Edie and things, like I broke. I was just like, thank you, God, for like using her. Even like this is what she would want, is for people to still get, you already know the Lord, but to get closer to God and to do something for God to help other people, not be ashamed. And I loved, we had revival the week that Edie passed. And I guess maybe the day after she died is when Brother Randall preached on embarrass your flesh. Like it's time that you embarrass your flesh. And that's
what I said. It's time for me to get over that. And, my intent is not to hurt anybody, drag up any bones. but there may be some of that stuff that
Other people are going through.
or people that know me may be sensitive to me telling it, but it's time to embarrass the flesh and
Put it out there.
put it out there and walk closer with God.
Amen. Amen. So we're going to start when you were born, and we're just going to work our way through, and I'm just going to kind of let you, just kind of share with us what you want as you go. And I told you earlier before we started, and I tell everyone just to let God lead you. We're not going to worry about everything that's on this page. We're going to go in order, but if you decide halfway through, God don't want me telling that. You just be led by Him. So I'm going to tell your age though, because you got it down here.
Sorry.
January 19th of 1970. You were born.
I was born during an ice storm. The roads were closed, and I was born not crying. I wouldn't cry, and they weren't sure that I wasn't deaf. And I just didn't respond. No sound, no response. I weighed 5 pounds. I wasn't necessarily early. I was just preemie.
Right. So when did you come out of that? What changed?
When at that time, my parents were really big into the Assembly of God Church at Cushman, and we were in revival, and they took me to church and took me to the altar, and the church laid hands and prayed over me. And I've heard this story my whole life that before they finished praying, I was crying.
You've been talking ever since.
I've been talking ever since. But literally, I was 6 weeks old and hadn't made
a noise in 6 weeks. That's incredible. So I also want to know that you had a brother and a sister. So now were they both older than you?
Mm-hmm. My brother's 11 years older than me, and my sister's 8 years older than me.
Okay. So as you grew up, you kind of they got out of the house quite a bit before you did.
Mm-hmm.
Dad was mechanic, and your mom worked at one of the factories. So two working parents. Just walk us through the next few years. Tell me a little bit about
when I was 5. The best I remember, my parents were drinking a lot. I don't remember going to church during that time. I'm sure my grandmother probably took me, but I just
don't have those.
There's a lot of stuff I don't remember. So when I was 5, we bought our first small town grocery store in Cushman, and it was at that point my mother became very terrified of anybody knowing anything bad about us because it would affect our business. And, that's
what was bringing in the money.
What was bringing in the money. We were not allowed to have bad days. We were not allowed to cry in public. We were
very secretive.
Everything was just a secret.
You've got a note here that you found your hidey hole. Tell me about that.
So there was a hole, probably a lot smaller than this hole, between 2 shelves, like grocery shelves. And there was a pillar that kind of blocked your vision into that little hole.
Nobody could see in.
So nobody could see you. So I would stay in that hole all day, a lot.
And this is at 6 years old.
This is at 6 years old. I was very introverted. I was very bashful. I was very
quiet.
Yes.
Well, and probably at this point afraid of doing anything wrong.
Right, because Mom had a temper, bad temper. Dad didn't, but Mom did.
So at age 7, you've got here that your parents divorced, and they've been driven to alcoholism. Now, is that for both of them? Were they both drinking a lot?
Yes, both of them very much so. And shortly after the divorce, Mom started dating, as most anybody would, but I hate to say this, but it's part of my story, and I feel like this is part of what happened. But
what caused everything? Not caused.
It didn't cause it.
But had a lot to do with the rest of your story. It had an impact.
Right, it had an impact because it still affects me to this day. She started giving me sleeping pills. And it was like she did it so that, I would be out of the way, I guess. And they
She
were
had men over.
they would be men over. And what was I gonna say? She she just started giving me sleeping pills, and I didn't.
And this was at age 8.
This was at age 8, and they were over the counter, and she was getting married again at age 8 or 9. So I was on sleeping pills at that time, and couldn't sleep without them. At some point in time, I was 9 or 10.
So now this is also the same age.
Yes.
And I'm going to let you say that, or just you were raped.
I was raped. Very few people know about it. My brother doesn't know about it. I'm not sure my sister knows about it. They will when all this is out. But I went camping with a male friend of my mother's. Didn't really.
Never thought anything.
It's 1978, and I remember us camping on the creek, and him telling me to swim in my underwear so that I would have something dry to.
Put on.
So bashful me, I swim in my underwear and my clothes. So then,
You didn't have any clothes.
no. And so I slept with him naked. And it just
You were
happened.
8.
I was 8. And he gave me my sleeping pills as
normal.
As normal. And some of it, it seems like a dream, but it's reality. And I never trusted another man after that.
Well, like you said, that was a big, 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 big deal that has still affected you today.
Right.
So at age 9, let's talk about you were struggling in school. And so they decided to test you. They thought.
Yes, I had gone from a straight A student to failing. And, they knew about the divorce and they thought I might have had a breakdown. They didn't know about the rape. So a couple of teachers took me to Jonesboro to be tested mentally because they thought I'd had a mental breakdown. Well, come to find out, passed all the mental tests. I was okay. So they thought.
Yeah.
But I had
fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it. I had lost 75% of my vision. I was basically legally blind.
And nobody knew. Crazy. And you probably didn't even realize that you were struggling so bad, but
there was so much happening, and my sister was running wild, and my brother. My sister was moving out then, and my brother had moved out way before that.
Well, and this kind of goes back to the secrets and not having a bad day and not being able to talk about things. Like, you just powered through. Like,
my sister and I have joked multiple times over the years that I knew as a child that I either had to learn to be sneaky and get away with it, or be like her and get my butt beat every day. Because, it was the 70s. We got whippings. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I still believe whippings and punishment is good.
it was a different situation.
It was a different situation. So she was getting whipped, or beat.
Was there much love shown?
From my sister, yes.
What about from your mom or dad?
My dad, yes.
Yes.
Mom, it was almost more like a burden, but I know she loved me.
Do you think maybe she had some demons and secrets that she was struggling with that and had the same kind of impacts on her? And
she did. And I don't really know what happened, but I know she had some stuff.
And this seems to come up a lot in these testimonies that we've been doing. So like, I guess I feel like God just laid it on my heart to say this, so I'm going to say it because it's kind of been a theme. But that goes back to those generational curses.
Bingo.
And I feel like I'll get emotional because I'm telling you, through so many of these testimonies, not everyone, but through a lot of them, there is these generational curses and these generational sins that have had a major part in these people who, now they've come out of that life, but went through so much because of not just what happened to them and their sin, but their family or their, people involved in their story was struggling from past
Mhm.
generational curses.
I barely remember my mom's dad, my grandpa. He died when I was 7 or 8, but I guess he was pretty mean. He ran moonshine, and um,
There's really no telling what all
mm-mm,
she went through.
no,
And that, that kind of lifestyle, there's no, I mean, we could speculate all day, but whenever you're doing things like that, you talk about the moonshine, you're surrounding yourself by, all
and
these people. There's no telling what their
I
story
remember being
was.
at the house that my grandpa made moonshine. It was down on Lafferty Creek in Colleytown, and he had a house down there that only he lived in. The rest of the family lived somewhere else. But I would go down there sometimes with him, and you know,
So after the vision, what did they do about that? Like,
they put me in classes. They wanted to do surgery, and mom wouldn't let them because she was afraid that um, back then, especially uh, the star, you see the scars. You could see,
from the
mhm,
surgery. Okay, so there was some cosmetic stuff that you would have had to deal with.
yeah. So I've worn glasses and contacts my whole life. So
So I'm going to hit on because I want to make sure for time's sake that we get down to some of this other stuff in a timely manner and not having to rush through. So I'm going to hit a couple of these things that you wrote. Um, so after the vision ordeal from ages 9 to 12, you said that you have very few memories except camps. Mom sent you to a lot of camps, church, ranch, like you name it. She just
mhm,
anywhere to send you to kind of not have to deal with you. And it was sometime during these years where you got saved and
mhm,
you met the Lord. Um, so you get saved, but you have no, like, you just come back home to the regular life. Like
right. I
you're
tell them,
not being taught anything. You're not in church regularly.
well, I go to church, but I don't even talk about it at church. I don't
Yeah.
talk about it
So
at
that
home.
was another thing. You kept it a secret that you got saved
Hmm.
because, once again, you just don't share things
No,
because from a little, we don't share.
and probably at that age, I still couldn't distinguish between a good secret and a bad secret. So everything was secret.
Secret. And I'm sure being an introvert didn't help things,
Mm-mm.
as far as just, it was easy for you to just keep silent. It was easier that way. Um, at age 12, your parents remarried and divorced in the same year. So your mom and dad got back together, but
Yes.
then still didn't work out and they
Mm-mm.
split up again. At this point, you're in sixth grade and you're failing.
Hmm.
So your mom changed schools.
Right. Put
And
me
you were
in a
at an
private.
enrolled private Christian school.
Mhm.
So how did that change? Did that change anything for you, do you feel like? Or was it
I think it put me around some positive people that were um, focused on God and focused on living right. Because you can imagine in the grocery store, people in and out. I mean, and you had to be nice to everybody,
right?
whether they were bad people or not.
Yeah.
But it got me in a Bible class. It got me to studying. I stayed in trouble all the time because I used words that they thought were bad that really weren't bad words. But
Yeah.
um,
Just not their
yeah, I was pretty much a rebel at the school.
not Helen.
No, yeah, I was.
Funny.
But yeah, it put me in
A
a
better
godly.
surrounding.
Hmm.
So the next year your mom remarried for the fourth time and you moved to Sydney.
Right.
And then you changed schools again
Hmm.
and you started going to Mount Pleasant.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's. Your mom had gotten remarried the next year after you're in Mount Pleasant. Your dad gets remarried, and so your mom told you that if you went to your dad's, not to come home. So I guess she had ill feelings towards your dad.
She had ill feelings, and his new wife had a teenage daughter and an older daughter that special needs, Down syndrome.
Okay.
And I mean, they were in this tiny house, and I really think mom just knew that she kind of had me, that I would never want to live in a tiny house with 4 people. Because, I mean, so um, what the final straw of that was, my stepsister and I had gone to the skating rink one weekend, and the next weekend she went by herself because I was back with mom.
Mm-hmm.
She ended up sleeping with someone. She was just like 14 or 15 too.
Yeah.
And it was a black man, of course, in that.
So your stepsister.
My stepsister.
Okay. Yeah.
And so my dad calls mom, and my stepsister has told him that I introduced her to him, and I had already been sleeping with him, and
It was all lies.
It was all lies.
So after this, you've got a note here that says manage and operated store days at a time alone. What is?
It was a family business, and we had opened one at Sydney when I was 13, 14, somewhere in there. And we never hired anybody. I started learning how to. It's a joke, and it's not a joke, it's the truth. I terminated my first employee when I was 13.
Wow.
And
Yeah, that's just how it was back then.
Mom told me if they didn't work, send them home. So I sent them home.
So you also got baptized this year at Sydney Baptist Church. That's also something that wasn't talked about.
No, Sydney Baptist Church was great. It's still almost like my home church, even though I don't know very many people there now. But mom didn't go to church with me, but insisted that I go every time the doors was open. I think it was her way of trying to break that generational curse.
Like, I'm not going to get what I know you need it. And I've heard that a lot in people's stories too, that the parent wouldn't go, but it's almost like they wanted better for like they knew that was the answer, but they couldn't put down the life and turn away from it. And so that's something to note for sure. So fast forward 2 years later, you went to DC. And this is when you really started like, there's more to life.
There's more to life in Sydney, Arkansas.
Yeah.
I mean, 270 people, and I mean, it was incredible for me. But I mean, I have really got a wandering spirit, a free spirit. I want to
travel, and
I love it. I mean, I just feel like when I start talking about travel, I'm like, ooh, let's go somewhere.
Yeah. So at 17, you got to see your dad for the first time since 84. So it'd been about 3
years.
Around 3 years. And then you just make a decision to join the Air Force. Okay. So you signed papers to join the Air Force at graduation. Then I guess once same age, you started lying to the doctor about your age to get speed. You drank for the first time and only time until you went to the military. So
I have to kind of paint the picture that I was very active in the church. I was assistant Sunday school teacher with 3rd and 4th graders. I was kind of like very involved. Kind of reminds me a lot of Logan right now in church.
Yes. Same age.
I was that person, but started running with some bad people. And I needed, someone had taught me about diet pills, being able to keep you up for days at a time. And so I started experimenting.
and then you drank for the first time.
hmm
And then it also says here you went on your first date,
hmm
actual date.
Epic fail.
And you also got drunk for the first
Mhm.
time.
I got drunk and lost my voice. It was horrible.
So by the next year, you're still in 12th grade,
hmm
not graduated yet, but in 1988 you got pregnant.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to let you go on into this. And
So it was right before my 18th birthday. I had started dating someone, and it was really my first ever boyfriend relationship that was beyond just saying, I
Yeah.
like you or something
Right.
silly like that. And so I wanted to feel grown up, I guess, but I didn't tell him that I had never had sex. He was 6 years older than me, so he would have been 24. And it didn't take long. I was pregnant, and I remember trying to hide it, and finally, Mom figured out something was wrong, and she figured out that I might be pregnant, and so she bought me the pregnancy test, and I took it, and of course, it was positive. Um, and so she made me go tell the guy. So I did. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you. You need to go home and beg your mom for an abortion. At that point, I was just running scared.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I thought about it, because I was kind of desperate to leave home because
And you knew that would have kept you out of the Air Force.
absolutely, absolutely, I knew I was going to be trapped at my mom's house
With a baby.
with a baby because he obviously was not going to be any help.
Right.
And so I went home and I told Mom what he said, and she's like, "Well, you don't want an abortion, do you?" And I'm like, "I do." And so she takes me to this old country doctor, um, and yep, I'm pregnant. And she talks to him about an abortion, and he sets me up an appointment in Little Rock at a clinic at night. This is the 80s. This is when people were getting killed for going to abortion clinics and so forth. And so Mom asked him, I think, I don't really remember how it come up, about how to abort it myself and not go to a clinic. And so he explains that if I torment the fetus in the womb enough, the body will assume it's infected and pass it. And so for the next 2 weeks, maybe 3, I do a lot of bad things trying to get that baby to abort. And I finally start bleeding. And when I get to the clinic for the abortion, I'm not pregnant. I killed my baby. I don't think I would have ever done that if I hadn't have felt so desperate. But at the moment, desperate people do desperate things.
Well, and you didn't have anybody showing you there was another way.
I didn't, and my best friend, she had no idea I was pregnant. I had 2 really good friends. Neither one of them knew that. I told nobody. Mom made me swear that I would never tell anybody. And we didn't discuss that I had killed that child, but I knew I had. I mean, I knew that
You knew what you had
I
done.
knew the difference between right and wrong, and I knew abortion was wrong.
So that happened somewhere around March or April
Mm-hmm.
of your senior year. You graduated in June.
Mm-hmm.
You took a class trip to Florida.
Mhm.
And again, it's just more of what you felt when you went to DC. Like there's more out there than
Right. It was
like
like a different life.
yeah. And in July, you left for basic training. You went to San Antonio, Texas, and then the tech school to be a ground support mechanic in
Mhm.
Illinois. So right now, we're in 1988. You're 18 years old, and
Mhm.
you're in the Air Force. And we're going to go into life in the Air Force, but life in the Air Force wasn't good for you as far as the decisions and the things that you.
You know, I was a very mature person, but because I kept so many secrets so good, I started getting away with all kinds of stuff.
And then the big one right before you went, I mean, I'm sure at the time you were fine. You were fine.
I was just functioning. Yeah.
But I'm sure that had major, major, major effects on the next numerous years.
You know, at the time, I didn't realize it was probably having that much effect on me. I think I had just blocked it,
Mm-hmm.
and I started doing anything that would make me feel good, that would cover.
Didn't want to feel any of that.
No.
Yeah. So once you join the Air Force, you've got raging, reckless behavior, sex, and drinking every day.
Yeah. I mean, like, if I'd have gotten pregnant, there's no way I could have told you who. I mean, it was just,
Whatever came your way.
yeah. And I mean, we drank every night.
The next year, you get a permanent assignment to Italy.
Hmm.
I can't say that word. Where it is in Italy, so I'll let you say that.
Aviano, Italy.
Yeah. And you was told you'd either become a religious freak or an alcoholic. Where did that comment stem from? What? Just because
It
of the
was just,
culture
it was
there?
a culture. It 100%. They were telling me, stay out of this bar. It's a meat market. And I'm like, what's a meat market? I have no idea what they're talking about. Now I get it. But there was really nothing to do. It was a small town about the size of Cave City with this big base there. And I was 19, legal to drink in Italy. You were big enough to put it on the bar, the money on the bar, they would sell it to you. And so I started drinking and staying drunk, and the behavior just kept getting worse and worse and worse. It was, I mean, and I knew better. I mean, I felt like a whore. I was a whore. I mean,
That's how it was.
it's just how it was. And it was,
So the 6 men to every female on base. What was that for?
it just, the ratio.
Very, very. It was just
Of course, you know,
very few women.
there's
during
very
this
few
time.
women anyway, but at this particular base, there was one dorm of females, which held probably 50 or 60, and there were like 10 dorms of men. Some of them held more, they're 50 or 60. So,
Just very few of you, and a lot of them.
yeah, and you know, when I would go to the bars, I would black out. And most of the time, I didn't even know where I was at when I would wake up.
So the next year, so now we're 2 years in.
Hmm.
The U.S. declared war. We're at Desert Storm. You went to South Italy on TDY.
Hmm.
You were there for several weeks, and your supervisor refused to let you drink. He was trying to be.
Yeah, he knew I had a drinking problem, and he refused to let me drink and refused to let me go to any bars. And made me get up every morning and run. But it only took me about one day to meet people on the Army post, and they started coming to my hotel room.
So The next year, you got transferred to Florida,
hmm
and you swore to yourself that you would change. What spurred that
All the embarrassment
of the
for,
life you was living?
of the life I was living. And I knew life in church was much better.
Right.
And I missed that. I miss being close to God. I miss being next to good people.
People that you could trust, even though you didn't really trust anybody anyway, but you really couldn't trust the people you were around
hmm
at this time.
So that year, Easter was in like early March. It was really early that year. And I never forget, I went and bought a dress, like a church dress, the first church dress I've had since I left home. And I get all dressed up. I can't get anybody to go to church with me. I'm living in the dorm, so I walk over to the church. It's a Protestant church, you know, kind of that's about all that's on base is Protestant and Catholic. And I never forget the minister says, if you think this one Sunday is going to save your soul, you're wrong. And you just might as well go back and figure out what you need to do. And that was the last time I stepped foot in church, except for funerals for probably 12 years.
Hmm.
And I just took offense to it when I really shouldn't have, because he was 100% right. One Sunday is not going to cut it.
But it was conviction.
It was conviction. And I wanted different, but I left that church service that day, got drunk, and started drinking again.
So right after that, like literally the next month, you TDY to support Desert Storm in Saudi Arabia.
Yes,
Okay. So talk about that. You have your first ever normal relationship.
I do. I met a man. I mean, everybody thought we were sleeping together, but we just got together every night and played board games and talked and
Got to know one
got to
another,
know each other. And I mean,
which was nothing like you had in the past.
no. And I mean, he was 10 years, 11 years older than me, but he was so nice. And so, I mean, this went on for a long time, several weeks.
Yeah.
And
So there was limited drinking during this time.
yeah, that you couldn't get alcohol there except,
Now was he Air Force too?
mhm.
Okay.
He was Air Force too. And there was no drinking. There was, I mean, very little.
Yeah.
There was some moonshine that you could buy around, but in Saudi, nobody has alcohol much.
Right.
But I fell head over heels in love with him.
So talk about June, where someone tried to kidnap you.
I was in town. I can't remember the name of the town. At this time, we were at a place called Al-Kabar, but we drove into town. I'm walking down the street, and I have a man with me that I worked with, and there comes this car up beside me. I'm walking this way. This car runs up here. This man jumps out of his car, and he grabs my arm, hands Ron, my coworker, a wad of money, and starts dragging me into his car. No conversation, no nothing.
Mm.
And my first thought was, if I hit him,
Oh yeah.
I'll go to Saudi prison.
Wow. Yeah.
And women have a different place, or they did then there.
Wow.
And so I was screaming at Ron to give him money back, and I was screaming at him. And I got all the way, like,
To the car
my back was pushed up against the car, and like my rear was
going in.
going in. And it was one of those older cars that didn't have a console in the middle. So it was just like everybody slides across. So I finally broke loose, and I grabbed Ron. I was like, I mean, I was doing some major cussing and threatening to,
Yeah.
I mean,
Was he just standing there like
Yeah, he was so
shock?
he was so much in shock.
Yeah.
He didn't realize what was happening. I don't
Yeah.
think. And I did. I mean, and I wasn't going, but I was scared to death. And I didn't realize for years that how that created such a feeling. Anytime I feel like I'm trapped, or if I get,
Major PTSD,
yes,
anxiety, and
yes, if I get in crowds to this day, I still struggle.
yeah.
And a lot during my therapy, I've caught myself saying, "Well, they held me hostage," and it took me a while to figure out where that hostage conversation was coming from.
Because they never really held you hostage.
No, nobody ever really held me hostage. I just had a major fear of being held hostage, and that might go back
Well, and
things that happened as a child.
yeah. Well, it was holding your mind hostage. Nothing
Absolutely,
else.
absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a wrap for today. Be sure to tune in next week and catch the rest of Helen's story.